In imperial China, castration was a requirement for men who wanted to serve as eunuchs in the palace. The Ming dynasty, 1368 to 1644, had one of the largest eunuch systems in Chinese history, employing thousands of castrated men in government and court service. One notable figure was Zheng He, the admiral who led China's great naval expeditions between 1405 and 1433. As a child, Zheng He was captured by Ming forces during a military campaign. He was castrated before being assigned to palace service. The procedure was extreme. Unlike partial castration seen in other cultures, Chinese castration removed both the penis and the testicles, referred to as the root and stem. The operation was done with a sharp knife, without anesthetics. A small tube was inserted into the urethra to prevent it from closing as the wound healed. Mortality was high. Many bled to death or died from infection. Those who survived lived with lifelong complications, including difficulty urinating and chronic pain. The purpose was political and social control. Eunuchs could not father children, which eliminated family ties that might compete with loyalty to the emperor. Their presence in the inner palace was also considered safe, as they posed no sexual threat to imperial women. By the late Ming dynasty, eunuchs held immense power at court, with some controlling entire government departments. Their existence reflected both the brutality of the practice and its role in maintaining imperial authority. In medieval Europe, castration was often used as a punishment for rebels, prisoners of war, or criminals. Instead of execution, rulers sometimes chose mutilation as a way to permanently cripple and humiliate their enemies. One recorded case occurred in England in 1067, shortly after the Norman conquest. A rebellion broke out against King William the Conqueror. Chroniclers note that captured rebels were not executed but mutilated, many were blinded, others were castrated. The punishment removed them from political life, ensured they could not produce heirs, and left them socially disgraced. The method was direct and brutal. Prisoners were restrained while their testicles were cut off with knives. No anesthetics or medical care were provided. Infection, gangrene, and death were common outcomes for those who survived the initial operation. The reasons were both symbolic and practical. Castration was seen as worse than death for many men of the time because it stripped them of lineage, masculinity, and honor. For rulers, it was a way to neutralize enemies without creating martyrs, while sending a public warning of the consequences of rebellion. Similar punishments were reported elsewhere in Europe during the Middle Ages, often combined with other mutilations such as blinding or amputating limbs. Origen was a Christian scholar and teacher in Alexandria around the early 3rd century. He is known as one of the Church Fathers, but his life included an incident that shocked even his contemporaries. Origen read a verse in the Gospel of Matthew, 19:12, that spoke of eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Taking this literally, he castrated himself as a young man. The operation was performed with a blade, removing his testicles without any form of anesthesia or medical support. The risks were severe: heavy bleeding, infection, and likely long-term health consequences. Despite these dangers, he survived. His reasons were both religious and practical. He believed physical mutilation would help him avoid sexual temptation and demonstrate absolute devotion to God. In addition, as a teacher, it removed suspicion when instructing young women in Scripture. Later Christian leaders, including the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, condemned self-castration, citing Origen as an example of misinterpreting Scripture. His writings survived, but the act left a controversial mark on his legacy. Long before the Middle Ages or empires of kings, castration was already being used as one of the most feared punishments in human history. In ancient Mesopotamia and Assyria, conquerors saw it as the perfect way to break their enemies. Soldiers captured in war were often dragged into the open, tied down, and mutilated in front of their comrades. The method was as crude as it was terrifying. Sometimes heavy stones were used to crush the testicles, a slow and agonizing form of torture that ensured the victim's screams carried across the battlefield. In other cases, a sharpened knife or bronze blade sliced them off in one motion. But without anesthesia or proper tools, even the quick methods were anything but merciful. The purpose was clear: to humiliate and erase masculinity. A man who lost his genitals could no longer reproduce, could no longer claim the honor of fatherhood, and was forever marked as weak. In societies where strength and fertility meant survival, this was worse than death. Ancient records describe how kings even paraded the castrated captives as living trophies. To see warriors stripped not just of weapons but of their very manhood sent a message louder than any speech: rebellion meant mutilation, dishonor, and a slow death from infection or bleeding. For criminals, too, castration was the ultimate punishment. In Assyria, men guilty of adultery, rape, or treachery often faced the blade. It was seen as both revenge and deterrence, a way to scar the body so brutally that others would think twice before breaking the law. What makes this form of punishment so haunting is that it wasn't about ending life. Execution killed quickly. Castration kept the victim alive, but forever broken. In ancient times, that was the true terror: being left alive to carry shame and agony for the rest of one's days. In ancient Rome, some of the most terrifying castrations weren't punishments at all, they were acts of faith. Among the followers of the goddess Cybele, known as the Galli priests, castration was the ultimate ritual of devotion. What makes it so chilling is that it wasn't forced by rulers or armies. Men chose to mutilate themselves in the name of religion. During the annual festival of Cybele, the atmosphere was wild. Drums pounded, flutes shrieked, and men worked themselves into a frenzy of dancing and chanting. At the height of this ecstatic madness, young initiates would strip naked, grab a sharp flint or knife, and with the crowd screaming around them, they hacked away at their own genitals. The act was brutal and bloody. No surgeon, no medicine, no preparation. Just raw human flesh meeting stone or iron. Many bled to death on the spot. Those who survived were left permanently scarred, their manhood gone forever. Yet in the eyes of their cult, they were now reborn, neither man nor woman, but something sacred. This practice horrified Roman society. Outsiders saw the Galli as a grotesque display of religious extremism, but within their own circles, castration was proof of ultimate loyalty. Refusing to do it meant being considered unworthy of the goddess herself. The brutality of these religious castrations was twofold: not only was the body destroyed, but identity was deliberately erased. The Galli priests even dressed in women's clothing after their castration, blurring the line between male and female. In a time when masculinity meant power, dominance, and family, these men willingly surrendered everything: blood, dignity, and life itself in the name of divine worship. Looking back, castration was more than just a punishment, it was a weapon of control, humiliation, and fear. Empires used it to crush their enemies. Religions turned it into a ritual of sacrifice. And rulers saw it as a way to erase rivals without spilling royal blood. What made it so terrifying wasn't only the pain of the blade, the burning iron, or the crushing stone. It was the life that came after. Survivors weren't just scarred, they were stripped of identity, manhood, and dignity. They lived as reminders of what absolute power could do to the human body. In a world where death could come quickly on the battlefield, castration was something far worse. It didn't kill instantly. It left men alive but broken, mocked, and forever silenced. History shows us many brutal punishments. But few carried the same lasting terror as castration. It wasn't only about ending bloodlines or enforcing obedience. It was about destroying the very essence of what it meant to be a man. And that's why, even centuries later, the thought of it still chills us to the bone.